Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Very much appreciated. We hope, Gavin and I hope, that you get a great deal out of this evening. So, we've labelled this Spirit of the Mountains. And first up, we want to go into why we're here. So I'm going to speak to my personal why I've jumped into this and developed this program, and then why I've teamed up with my friend Gavin, and then later on when Gavin gets an opportunity to speak, he'll also share his version of that. So why am I here? Because I believe in evolving ourselves as people. I believe in expanding our minds at every opportunity possible. And I also know the value and the benefit of immersion. So immersing ourselves in an environment that challenges every facet of our being, our minds, our bodies, our spirit, our emotional states, that takes us out of our comfort zones. And that's my why, that's why I'm here. And I also know that the material that I teach, it works, and it works really well. Because I simply stand on the shoulders of giants. The material I teach is not uniquely only my own. That's an impossibility, and it's an arrogance to think that that would be the case. No, I take a lot of my material from very, very great minds, present and past, and I assimilate it and put it together in my own way. And it makes it unique because it's the way I present it. But the uniqueness of this, and we're going to get to the uniqueness of this in a moment, is that I'm presenting, in working in conjunction with Gavin, and that's one of the reasons why I've teamed up with Gavin and Gavin's teamed up with me, is because we have a very similar personal and organisational value set with respect to why we do what we do. It's about being of service, it's about connecting with people, it's about learning and growing from others that we work very closely with. So that's my why. During this presentation this evening, I want you to think about your why, not so much why you're here learning about this, because there's probably not too much that you know about it besides the information that was presented on the digital flyer via social media, but more is, why do you wish to expand yourself as a person? Why do you wish to grow? What does growth represent for you? So just to be thinking about that during today. That's a picture of Gavin. That was actually taken on our first mountaineering trip, wasn't it, Gavin?
Yeah.
Yeah. We just thought we'd just throw these in. And that's me on that first trip. I'm very burnt. And we were talking to Brendan before about it gets hot. It's quite warm in the mountains. I was quite burnt there. So I want to go through the unique point of difference. So this is not just a course in personal growth or personal development or self-help or whatever label you want to put around it. And it's not just a mountaineering course, it's far more than that. It's a combination of the both. And I spoke to this a little bit earlier about being an immersive experience. When we're in an environment that's so immersive, that is totally out of our comfort zone, that we're physically challenged, that integrates with our ability to engage our cognitive faculties and also really challenges us and pushes us emotionally, the experience that we have is very, very different to just sitting in a classroom, for example, or in a lecture hall, or reading books. Not that there's anything wrong with that, not that that's any less of any type of development, it's just very different. This is a very, very powerful form of learning and growing. Because and Gavin will go into this in great detail, whilst the technical difficulty of this excursion or this adventure that we're about to embark on, this 9-day adventure, is at a lower level, and Gavin will definitely demonstrate this, it's still very challenging being out there in the elements. And it's still very confronting at a sensory level, at a neurological level, at a psycho-emotional level, and a spiritual level as well. And the unique point of difference with this entire experience is that the program draws that out of you. The program makes you accountable for you and look at yourself as a person and who you are and where you're going in life. So I'm going to speak a little bit to the actual program, okay? To just a little bit to the program, because otherwise we'd be here for hours and hours. But I want to touch on some of the pertinent subject matter and some of the values that we're going to go through whilst being immersed in the mountains, yeah? We go through life's purpose. We go through a hierarchy of values. So we begin as individuals to understand this, and we conduct exercises on the mountain. They're very full days. We're trekking, we're climbing, we're learning, we're growing, we're learning new skills, mountaineering, but we're also learning about ourselves, and we're also engaged in a process of sovereign leadership, which we're going to come to in a moment. We go through exercises of knowing self at great depth. The shadow self is insight into the completeness and wholeness and fullness of who we are. Okay, and it's really tapping into aspects of self that we're not too familiar with and that we don't really pay too much attention to. We begin to learn to master the 9 areas of life and create equilibrium and balance and homeostasis in our lives through understanding what the 9 areas are and how to achieve balance in those areas. You're very confronted being on the mountain, so we definitely go through a great deal of what courage and fear is and what fear represents and how we can work and move through fear and how we can leverage fear to our advantage, and that correlates and transcends to everyday life. You take these skills that we learn in this 9-day immersive experience and you bring these skills back to your everyday life. How you deal with people, how you deal with yourself in confronting with difficult or challenging, arduous situations. We learn how to communicate more effectively. On the mountain you have to, you've got no choice, you need to communicate. Not only with yourself in your own mind and your own self-talk, so we learn how to control and understand and manage that self-talk, but also how you communicate with those around you that you rely on, that they rely on you to be effective, efficient, and able to correspond in a clear manner. We look at relationships, of course, because we develop very acute relationships. Some of the best friendships are made on the mountain. And you're only with them for a few days, and they're lifelong friendships. They become lifelong friendships. That's why when we look at, done a lot of work in the past with special forces units, and you look at the bonds that are formed in those units, and irrespective of, and we're not going to get into a philosophical discussion about whether war is moral or immoral or ethical and so forth, but when we're looking at the bonds that soldiers form in a very short period of time, it's because they rely on each other to survive. Now, it's not that extreme in a mountain, of course, but you're out of your comfort zone. Your familiarity, your perception of safety is very different to sitting on comfortable chairs in a fairly warm room in a familiar environment. It's very different. Even if you've been mountaineering many, many times before, as Gavin has, far more than I have, you're still very acutely aware of your surroundings. Every step you take, you become very present. So we talk about that, we learn how to get present, really get present in the moment. I'm actually going to go through the authentic self model today very briefly. And we're going to obviously look at mindset. Today I'll discuss some of the points, but when we're on the mountain, these are some of the key teachings that we go through. So this is a sovereign leadership model. So what I'm really going to do, there's 14 tenets of sovereign leadership that I've developed. And these are one of the key teachings and lessons that we go through when we're in the course. And really a sovereign leader is an effective leader for self. So you learn to govern yourself moving through the world. Because if we can't understand who we are, and if we don't know who we are, and if we can't lead ourselves effectively with prowess and skill and attention to who we are, and confidence and clarity, we can't lead others, we can't be a beacon of light for others, we can't really help others, and we don't really get the most out of our own lives. So these 14 tenets, which are very powerful tenets of that attribute or contribute to being a very effective sovereign leader, is something that we go through in great detail and discuss when we're in the mountains. We also go through what it means to live an authentic life, and here are some tenets as well that I've created around that authentic self model. And let's speak to the role of fear for a moment, because I think it's quite relative. It's understanding and embracing fear and leveraging fear, because fear, like failure, is feedback into self. It's feedback into our environment. It's feedback into the choices we are about to make. And it's learning how to view fear as something of benefit and something that's positive rather than something that's negative, and that we oppress or suppress and we forget about it. We don't pay any attention to it, and we lose the power of fear. This is a big one for so many of us. Life's purpose. Many of us wander through life not understanding what our purpose is. And if we don't understand our purpose or purposes in life, plural, we're lost. We are fragmented and broken. that doesn't only affect our journey, and we don't get the most out of life and who we are, but it affects those around us as well. And they suffer too. So life's purpose is really, really important. We learn to embrace the fullness of who we are and the wholeness of life. And what that really actually relates to there, I spoke to shadow self. And shadow self is a psychological term for aspects of self that we suppress and that we ignore, whether because of familial values, not agreeing with that characteristic or that expression of self, or social norms or cultural norms that don't value that aspect of self, and we suppress it. But the reality is it's an integral part of who we are. So I don't want to get too deep into the psychology of that now, or too deep into the frameworks of that now, because again, these are built out lessons in and of themselves. But I just want to touch on that and help you understand that that's some of what we go through. We help bring that out and own that, take ownership of that. Again, how do you show up in the world? Because how you do anything is how you do everything in life. We look at relationships in direct correspondence with what your life purpose is. We look at being inspired because when we're living a purposeful life, a meaningful life, we are more naturally inspired. And when we come from an inspired state, we want to get up in the morning. We have reasons to wake up in the morning. We're excited about life. And that's how life should be. That's how life can be, rather. Should's a dangerous word, but that's how life can be. We learn how to connect to others in an authentic manner. So we go back to the authenticity model, and connectedness is one of them, is one of those tenets. We look at connecting to others and how understanding our life's purpose draws in the people into our lives that are aligned with that purpose, that help us achieve that purpose. In turn, we are then able to help them because we're living a life of authenticity and truth. Talk about dreaming big and thinking big, because in today's society, too many of us are limited in the way we think. We're limited and we're very negative in our self-talk, and we don't take chances or jump into life or take risks because we have fears surrounding that, surrounding a potential perceived outcome. And we don't live fully, we don't take steps to live in accordance with what we really want in life. So we move towards knowing our purpose and understanding the depths of who we are as much as possible. We look at mindset because you need a clear mindset when you're in the mountain to get the most out of that experience. And we look at something called rigid and growth mindset. And there's a great author, Dr. Carolyn Dweck, who's actually got a book, Growth Mindset. In that book, she speaks to, and this framework's actually really a great deal of it's taken from that, and it speaks to the characteristics of a rigid mindset and a growth mindset. And then we look at brain plasticity as well, and that we don't need to be fixed as a person. So your personality is not fixed. We can change how we are and how we behave and who we are as people. And we go through some techniques and exercises, especially while immersed in the mountain, how to do that. So we look at, and see, being immersed in somewhere like the New Zealand Alps is perfect for real life, direct, experiential coping strategy, implementing coping strategies. With respect to when life presents us with difficulty, how do we react or respond? And we actually want to respond rather than react. There's a difference between the two terms, and we go through that extensively as well. Because again, pain, failure, fear, it's feedback into who we are. We need to allow that, the teaching or the wisdom that can come from those experiences to be shown to us, but we can only do that from a mindset that's open, that allows that to occur. We speak about the power of pain and failure. We look at mental resilience techniques and mental resilience conditioning and what that means. We look at simple techniques such as perspective. So being able to switch our perspective in a situation that's very, very challenging. And you can really learn this. And something that Gavin taught me a great deal was, because I was confronted, when my first mountaineering expedition with Gavin, I was very much confronted. And I remember there was a couple of times where I was physically paralysed. I just couldn't move because I was scared to step forward because there was a crevasse that was 50 meters deep and I thought I was going to fall down, or what if I placed my foot, my mind started wandering and wondering, what if I place my foot wrong, what if the person that's attached to my rope can't hold me, what if I take them down, and your mind just starts going crazy. And you don't have this perspective, and he's just so patient, he's cool, he's walking around everywhere, and it's like, how are you even doing that when I can't even move, right? But Gavin had this perspective and this deep understanding that came with experience, of course, and came with technical skill, but it also came from understanding life very differently. So we go through that, we learn, we take that perspective and then we bring it to our everyday life. It doesn't just last that 9 days in the mountains, because if you do it under intensity and you understand it well, it can transcend and transform and transmute into everyday life. When you're back home, or when you're doing what you are accustomed to doing. We want to teach you how to move from disempowered to empowered states of being. When we're in an empowered state of being, we're essentially inspired by life. And we go through those techniques, we go through those points. We understand beliefs and where they come from. We understand negative self-talk. We understand negative thought patterns, because when we understand something, we're better equipped to deal with it. When we understand its source and the why behind it, we have more insight into that situation, and we have greater revelation into that situation, and we can deal with it. And then we develop techniques based on the source of that to eliminate that limiting belief system or systems, or those negative thought patterns that we have, and we're able to move them on, move through them, and engage in a more empowered state of being. Now, Gavin's going to jump on soon. He's going to speak to fitness, minimum conditioning required, and so forth. Before he does that, I want to go into a little bit of background myself, just in case any of you aren't too familiar with that. And basically, I've been in the health and wellness industry for 15, 16 years. I've had the privilege and the honour to deal with and work with people from all walks of life, from amputees to people with psychosocial, psycho-emotional disorders, neurological disorders, special forces, police officers, Olympians, gold medalists, elite athletes. And I've done that in a capacity not only here but also internationally. And what I've found is that working with some of the greatest minds in the world, and even just children and elderly, is that everybody has a capacity to be the best version of themselves. And I know that may sound really simple, but the reality is most people actually don't embrace that. They don't embrace the fullness of their potentiality. So the space that I'm in now and the years of training that I've done in various domains has brought me to the Mastery of Self program, which is my marquee program, which is the core program I have. And I also deal with people, I deal with elite athletes now as well, and I still work with special forces soldiers as well on an individual basis. And I do work with people from all walks of life. But what I've found is that the more I work with people in a very intimate setting, the greater I am able to understand the mind, and I'm very blessed for that. So my background as well, I have a degree in psychology and philosophy, and I have a master's degree in another area that's unrelated to that. And numerous qualifications in the fitness or the health industry as well. With the first, myself and my business partner many years ago, were the first in 2008 now, I think it was, 2007. The first CrossFit gym in Western Australia, one of the first in the world actually. So came in at an entry level at the beginning of that craze, I suppose, and the popularity of CrossFit rising, and have engaged in various different training techniques, strength and conditioning, and mental strength conditioning techniques over the years. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background there on me before I passed you over to Gavin. And one more thing, and you may just keep this in mind for later, is that with regards, and I know sometimes health and fitness is something that can be quite daunting, and I know all of you here actually exercise anyway, so you all move your body with intent. Brendan, maybe not so much right now, but I know you're good for it. But the reality is that anyone can be prepared for this, and Gavin's really he's going to open your eyes up to how much exactly. But what I'm also offering is training leading up to this as well. And we'll go through that later. It's not necessary to go through that now, but just keep that in your mind. And I'm going to pass you over to Gavin, and he's going to blow your mind with some very interesting facts.
Isn't this guy incredible?
Very good.
Can you understand how enthusiastic I am to work with this guy? You're all familiar with him from the Perth scene. I don't get the pleasure of hanging out with him quite so much, but I jumped at the chance to come over and present this program to you, and gave us a chance to consolidate and solidify everything leading up to this particular program. On this journey, this is our destination. This beautiful place is Franz Josef. This photograph is taken from the perspective of the mountain hut that we go to, Centennial Hut, and it looks out onto the Tasman Sea. So about 2,000 kilometres to the west is the east coast of Australia. So shrouded in cloud, but quite often when we're in the mountains there, we've got beautiful blue sky days. My part of the program, I facilitate to a sort of a lower level than Stef, self-development, and for me that makes me fulfilled as a mountain guide. If I was just to take people for the next 20 years to the top of mountains, I'd be bored. For me, there's a lot more life questions and answers that come from going mountaineering because we're faced with so many different challenges. So learning to climb with focus and presence, we can adapt the focus and presence and bring it back to daily life. It's a key part of what I do. We're going to have daily mountaineering challenges that will just be a vehicle for Stef's Mastery of Self program. So we can really see, we've discussed this at length, we can really see how these two work well together. We're going to use those physical challenges to expand your awareness, and we're going to totally re-energize. What does the mountains do for us? When we go into nature and we connect with nature and all those elements, we get grounding, we get all of the earth, fire, water, air, we get exposure to all of these elements, the ancient elements as they're seen in all those different techniques or belief systems. And I have not had one single client come back from a trip and say, God, I'm spiritually drained. Everyone comes back re-energized and wants more. And part of what I do is also to give my clients skills to be able to take that to the next level, to not come away from the trip craving and wanting the next one, but using those skills back in town to be better people back in town, as it were. We can all be Buddha on the top of the mountain. You've probably heard that saying before. We can all be Buddha. The Buddha needs to come home and do his dirty laundry, right? So how do we do that? We've got some techniques for that. So there's no shortage of wild mountain terrain in New Zealand, in the Southern Alps. It's an incredible place, that's why I live there. The essential survival skills in the mountains are easily adaptable back in town. When you feel like you're faced with a challenge that's life or death, it's quite different to a challenge where you might lose some money, or you might sort of miss a bus, or your phone doesn't work and you can't make that phone call to be there on time. So, what's important? And for me, life seems easier when I'm faced with real challenges that mean life or death. Now on this trip, we're not going to face you every second of the day with life or death decisions. That's not what this is about, but you will be faced with some fears. And fear is optional, danger is real. So I'll give you lots of the, I don't need to give it to you, the mountains will give it to you. There'll be fear of this drop or that exposure, or am I really safe? I've got a 10 mil rope, my life's hanging on. So you'll be faced with fear, and we're going to play with that. We're going to use it to its best benefit. And using nature to connect to your true self. Obviously, nature is a great way to connect to your true self. So this will probably be the gateway to you arriving in New Zealand. Has anybody been in New Zealand before? Have you been to Queenstown?
I just went to Auckland.
Auckland? Okay.
Yeah, I stayed central with friends.
Well, you've missed the best part of New Zealand.
I've heard there's
The South Island is where it's at. World renowned as an adventure capital, and flying into Queenstown, you fly between these two mountains. So right from the get-go, you can fly into some pretty adventurous terrain, and it's known for being quite a narrow and short runway. So quite exciting place to fly into. Very picturesque. My base is Wanaka. This is just over the hill, so an hour's drive away, and this is where we will meet for the start of that trip.
Can I just say something, Gavin? Sorry.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, all these photos are Gavin's photos. It's good. So they're not stock photos, they're not pulled from the net. But just so you know, these are the photos that he's
Except for this one.
Oh yeah, wait. Again, the photos where there's people and so forth.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so
Should say almost.
more on that later. So that's the North and South Island. This is just the South Island, where it's at. And here's a close-up of the terrain we're going to go into. So, Wanaka, Queenstown, just an hour away, so you can see that distance there. Christchurch is another gateway, and there are direct flights now there in New Zealand, direct from Perth to Christchurch. So whichever way you can go Perth, Christchurch, Queenstown, or Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, or any of the hubs into Queenstown. But Queenstown will certainly get you closer to the action. Depends on what you want to do afterwards, before or after. Our destination then, once we've met, organised gear, and get everyone's pack established and on the road, we head over the hill to Fox Glacier, and we use helicopter flights to get into the high mountains. Centennial Hut, which we'll have a look at photos of in a moment, is at 2,300 metres above sea level, and it bridges that gap between Fox and Franz. And that drive takes about 3 hours. So day one, we meet, we get our packs sorted, any final things that might need to be purchased, and then we head over the 3-hour drive. Now we jump on one of these beautiful things. Has anybody been in a helicopter before? A couple of you? Okay, so included in this trip is a helicopter scenic flight and skyscrapers. No. We're going to fly over this beautiful glacier. This is the Fox Glacier. Generally, glaciers have a long trunk, and this is the trunk of the Fox. It's 13 kilometres long, and there's about 30 square kilometres. It's almost like this is the panhandle and this is the pan. 30 square kilometres of glaciated terrain collecting snow that compacts and then comes down the hill and creates all these broken crevasses. The Fox Glacier is right next to the Franz Josef Glacier. This is the top of the Franz from the air, and that's where we're going. That's our destination. This is where we land, and turning around and looking down the hill 100 metres away is Centennial Hut. Now, if we were to try and walk in there with 9 days food, it would be backbreaking. So the helicopter is a welcome break from breaking our backs. So Centennial Hut, it's an easy walk down the hill. This will be our base for the 9-day trip. If conditions allow, we will go to another hut, and on Stef's trip, on the second to last day, if I'm not mistaken, we went across into the Fox Glacier to Pioneer Hut, which is at the head of it's in a similar part of the frying pan to the Centennial Hut in the Franz Josef, if that makes sense. We've got 2 frying pans side by side. In the middle of one is Centennial Hut, and in the middle of the other is Pioneer. And if we have a chance, we'll go to Pioneer as well, after we've upskilled you in some mountaineering stuff. So this is what it looks on the inside. It's a hut. You can't book it in advance. You show up, and if there's space, you get a bunk. So this is our 5-star accommodation. our 5-star mountain accommodation. We go back to basics on this trip. If you want a spiritual retreat that is 5-star accommodation, well, there's plenty of those available. This is not one of those. This is one of those. We're going to go back to basics. It's about learning who we are by going back to basics. And I can guarantee you the effects of this kind of trip will be far longer lasting than going on one of those 5-star retreats. Nothing wrong with those. I've tried those as well. But I always come back to these.
If they're full, does that mean we would be camping outside?
Yeah, good question. We'll always bring, there's a few things I do before I fly into the mountains. One is I check with the other guiding companies how many people they've got in there. I check with the Department of Conservation to see how many people they've had on the previous evening through the radio. And then I also still bring, so I find out intentions and actual figures, but I also bring spare tents just in case. And the first people to go outside won't be you, it'll be us.
Oh no, but that's just to know we provide for that, just in case.
Yeah.
Okay.
We always bring at least one tent for the overflow, so that, you know, if another party arrives, it's not like our group's staying in here, we were here first kind of thing. So I've been there, it doesn't happen very often, but I've been there with it being 32 people and it's only 17 monks. But we still facilitated for everyone. We had a molly on the floor. And the idea is you go out and play during the day. And people don't come in those numbers unless the weather's good. And if the weather's good, they go out and play. So there's never usually an issue. But occasionally there's a little bit of juggling goes on to get everyone accommodated. On that point, we're going in February to avoid that Christmas, New Year busy period. So that's the time of year when you get those 30 people showing up. So we stay away from that period and we go in February because it's quieter. Usually by the end of January it tapers off and it's pretty quiet. So this is an example of the terrain we're going to go into. We'll rope up for glacier travel. One of the first skills you'll learn is roping up for glacier travel. We'll go out onto the glacier, we'll put crampons on our feet, an ice axe in your hand, and we'll go and check out the terrain and see what the glacier is all about. There's no better way to find out how to go mountaineering than actually walk in crampons and test things out. Sometimes the snow is quite hard, goes through a melt-freeze cycle, and the surface is really hard. It's easy walking, you can go for miles very quickly. And sometimes this is pretty hard conditions, and sometimes it's quite soft, and you go in up to your thighs. That's pretty hard work. Or it's a workout, depending on which way you want to look at it. But a challenge in its own right. And of course, on every mountaineering trip, there's usually a high point and some spectacular views. This is one particular peak, right on the border between the Fox Glacier and the Franz Josef, on Bülow Peak, where you get views out to the west coast and looking back towards the main divide. Centennial Hut, by the way, is right there. So it's about 2.5 kilometers away. So, you know, we'll travel around in glacier travel mode, coiling up for glacier travel. What's that all for? It's to stop you going into to stop you falling to your death if you fall into a crevasse. It won't stop you from falling into a crevasse, but it will stop you from potentially disappearing into one and never coming back again. Some of them are quite deep. The idea with glacier travel is you keep that rope tight and you walk as a team, so you get to work as a team, and that's in more ways than one. You're team building and relying on your partner. Your partner behind you is a mobile anchor. If you fall in, he stops you from going any further. And some of the things we'll do with that is we'll play on how to rescue each other, how to climb out of a crevasse, how to climb back up the rope. All of these great skills for survival, if you will.
Are these skill building aspects trained for specifically before you get there? Is there something in your program that you guys have developed?
We do it on the course. Okay. If, for example, you lived in Wanaka, I could run something beforehand, but since you're
Okay.
quite a distance, it isn't quite possible.
Okay.
What I do plan to do is record a bunch of tutorials in the mountains so that you can watch beforehand. You can watch, let's say, 10 different things you must do before you arrive. It's funny because no one has done it. So, you know, how do I tie this knot? How do I coil up for glacier travel? You know, all the simple things that you can actually do before you arrive. But generally, it takes us half a day. It takes us about an hour to get roped up and out onto the glacier. And we'll repeat that process every day, sometimes twice a day, so that you get really up to speed with roping up and putting your crampons on. The first day it'll take an hour, the second day it'll take 28 minutes. The third day it'll take 10. And hopefully it takes no more than 3 minutes every day after that. That's how quickly it should happen. Rope up, crampons on, out the door. You know, so within 45 minutes, we have breakfast or whatever. Now we will do it slightly differently each day, depending on what our objective is. The Mastery of Self program is something that's running in tandem with this. So we may stay in the hut for half of the morning and then go out when it warms up a little bit. We may go out at 3 o'clock in the morning by moonlight and come back for morning tea. It really depends on a number of factors, where we are in that Mastery of Self program, but also what is the weather doing. So we're very flexible in that regard, and we have to be. Well, one of the great skills we need to acquire if we want to do mountaineering properly: flexibility and patience. So important, and fully adaptable into daily life. Flexibility and patience. Just accept it as it is. So, I had a question earlier on: is this for me? Can I do this? Am I fit enough? And this is, I'm going to incorporate the answer to that by saying these are some of the clients I've had on my trip. So a father and son. The son is 12 years old. Here we are on the side of a hill. Looks pretty steep. They've done a couple of other trips, and they have big plans to climb Everest down the road. So just like any of you here, they've got plans, they've got aspirations, and we're already on the hill climbing some pretty steep stuff. This was the very last day. We had about an hour and a half before the weather would come in. We had a helicopter booked. We were flying out from that staging point. That Centennial hut, that's his dad with the 2 packs. And he said, he volunteered his son, he said, he's fast and fit, just go and climb something fast. So I said, okay, let's go. So within 45 minutes or an hour or so, we're on the top of this peak, right on the main divide. Beautiful, beautiful views. And the kid he's 12 and he's just over the moon. This is a guy who was 19, he was on leave from peacekeeping in Afghanistan, and his very first trip, no idea, first day out on the mountain. Look what he gets to see. Within the first half a day, he's looking at some of the most spectacular terrain in New Zealand. On that course, we throw him into a crevasse, and he has to prosec out. So he has to put on the little ropes to climb out of the crevasse, called self-rescue. It's amazing how much more confident people feel when they go into a crevasse, when they investigate it for themselves, and they find out all the different, we go through all the different ways to get yourself out of that problem. We go in and we walk into the crevasse, we go and see what it's like. When there's a floor on the crevasse, you can't fall any further. And again, it's a great way to build confidence. Go in and investigate that crevasse for yourself. So here, we're just up behind Centennial Hut here. We've got a bigger group of 4, and yeah, one of them's in the crevasse just beside me here, and we're doing the same thing. Their friend is on the surface, and they've lowered them in, and they have to climb back out themselves. So they just get anchored, and they have to climb back out. So it's a great skill and team building exercise. Another one is to climb out of it using the ice axis, so actually learning to ice climb, another skill that I teach on that course. Survival techniques. One of them is digging a hole or a snow cave. So we go and dig a cave, and if you really want to, when the hut's really full, you can spend the night in that cave. Checking the snow out is another skill we look at. What causes avalanches? Why is looking at little snowflakes so important? Not necessarily anything of interest right now, but it's very important for me to know that the snow is stable. I'm not going to expose you to risks that I believe are too high. So looking at the snowpack and finding out where the weaknesses are and if something might avalanche is a very important thing for me. And I will impart some of that on the trip. So yeah, this is another high point of the Franz Josef Glacier. The highest peak on the Franz Josef is just over 3,000 metres. It's called the Minarets. And in the background there you've got Mount Cook, the highest peak in New Zealand, 3,724 metres. Something that may be on your list at some point in the future. Looking down the Tasman Glacier, New Zealand's longest glacier, and looking up the glacier, that glacier is 28 kilometres long, so it's quite a trek to walk out. But again, a great team building exercise. Another example of the kind of people that come on my trips, a husband and wife team, never done any mountaineering before, and they came and spent a week with me, and it was smart. They were away from their trip, 3 kids, maybe that was the reason, but they had a great time learning those skills right from scratch. Never been in crampons before or put a rope on. And if you're wondering about am I fit or able enough, here's an example of a gentleman he's a double amputee below the knee, so he has no feet. And this guy lost his feet in 1982 with, this is Phil Dool. He lost his feet, and his colleague lost his feet too, Mark Inglis, who climbed Everest a few years ago. They both lost their feet on Mount Cook when they were caught there for 14 days. So they survived the ordeal, but sitting in the snow cave for 14 days, unfortunately they both lost their feet. He's still smiling, he still came back for more. His values haven't changed. He's obviously gone through a lot and learned a lot. And there's his prosthetics and his carbon feet. In fact, it took 20 years before the technology caught up with what he wanted to do. He spent a long time in pain putting prosthetics on. And now finally he's got decent prosthetics he can climb with. And this is what we climb Mountaineering, again on the main divide of the Southern Alps, with Mount Cook in the background. It always makes great photographs when Mount Cook's in the background. Again, another example, a friend of mine, she became a friend of mine through a friend. She's blind, she's got 10% vision, so she can see light and dark. And we're on the summit of this peak, Mount Aspiring, one of the 3,000 metre peaks in New Zealand. So here's an incredibly determined woman, with pretty good fitness, but bad coordination, bad balance, and no vision due to a brain injury. She set herself a goal. She just happened to mention this to me, and I said, well, shall we give it a go? Now she's a mountaineer. It's amazing what happens when you put it out to the universe. So there's an example. How fit, how able do I need to be? This is for everyone. The helicopter will take the sting out of going uphill with a heavy pack. We'll learn the skills to go mountaineering at the very top of the mountain, and then we'll either walk part way out and then fly the rest, or we'll fly all the way out. It's totally up to you, but you really haven't got the full perspective until you get in there and you start to feel, what's this mountaineering all about? What's it like to put on a pack? What's it like to put a rope on, crampons on, wear all this, heavier gear? Because you've got more gear on than you would as if you were walking around town. Part of what I do is I look after nutrition and fuel. The fuel for the trip is a major part for me. Working for the other guiding companies, and I've worked for guiding companies for the last 12 years. So I've established my own business now. One major reason for doing that is because of the food. I've tripled the budget for food because I want to bring in organic, GMO, spray-free, all of that kind of stuff. Make it the healthiest, the best I can. Homegrown if possible, home-baked if possible. This is the intention I bring to my trips now. So I started my own garden and I bring this stuff into the hills. And there's me cooking up a stove in a mountain hut. Now, one of the ways we get out, there's three ways to get out. You can walk the whole way down, you can walk halfway down, and this is probably most likely what we're going to go to Chancellor Hut, which is halfway down the Fox Glacier. Below this, the terrain starts to get a lot more tiger country, and the other option in the Franz Josef is Alma Hut. So you get to see quite a lot of terrain, and you can see there are a lot of options. There's no strict schedule on day 1 and 2 and 3. We'll do this, this, and this. There is a lot of flexibility in the mountaineering trip. We work the room. We work the questions that you put to us, and we work the weather and the terrain and the situation that's put to us as well. So what gear do you need? Well, some of you might have a climbing harness, some may not. Usually my clients have some or all of this kind of stuff here, but you need crampons, axes, helmets, head torch, a lot of extras as well. On this trip we include all of that stuff. All of the technical equipment is included. We'll look at some of the exclusions later on, but all of that is included. And I mentioned the weather already. We do the weather cycles in New Zealand. It's like a 7-day cycle. We will probably have some bad weather at some point. Hopefully, the best scenario is when it comes in the middle of the trip, because it gives us a chance to take stock and do a hot day, do some more theoretical stuff, have a physical rest, and then get back into it when the weather clears and be able to walk out or fly out when we want. If it comes at the start or at the end, it makes it a little bit trickier, and we have to massage that and work around it. But even when the weather's bad and it's snowing right here and it's a whiteout and there's visibility of about 50 meters, we're always able to do something and maximize that time. Certainly on this trip, with the Mastery of Self program, there will never be a quiet moment unless we're meditating. But this is my friend and colleague Jay Morris. She's her particular extra skill, apart from being a mountain guide, is nutrition. She's currently studying nutrition. She's heavily involved in that as well. Quite a spiritual person in her own right, and I'm very keen to work with her on this as well. If we go to 7 clients, anywhere between 4 and 7. So we're going to have a maximum of 7 and a minimum of 3 clients. That minimum 3 is flexible, but I'm not going to go into what that costs. I'll go into what it costs, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 people in a moment. Our aim is to have that, high facilitation ratio. So there'll be me and Stef there guaranteed with 3 clients. If we go to 4 clients, we're going to have that extra guide, 5, 6 or 7, same. So there'll be 3 facilitators, 2 mountain guides and Stef. And I'm not going to label Stef because he's unlabelable, if it's such a word. So what's included in this trip? Well, there's a lot of inclusions. The guiding and instruction fees, the Mastery of Self program, all the technical equipment that I mentioned, all ground transport, helicopter flights, accommodation. If we do get stuck in town because we can't fly in on the first day, or if we come out a day early, the food and accommodation back in town is also included. All trip food is included, so everything, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and everything in between, snacks, you name it. And it's organic, spray-free, GMO-free, homegrown, home-baked, wherever possible. The National Park concession fees, so when you hire me to guide you, I need to pay the government or the National Park to operate in the National Park. So that's all included. And there's no extra charge. If you have any special dietary requirements, there is no extra charge. Most, if not all, of the other companies will charge you something extra if there's, if there's a quirk in your diet. I believe that it's not a quirk, it's the new normal, and I have my own special needs, and it's high quality. So whatever it is, it's all included. And then the safety aspect of it, first aid kit, satellite phone, and personal locator beacon, that's all catered for as well. The exclusions, personal clothing, mountaineering boots, a sleeping bag, and climbing pack. So these are not quite the technical things. Most people here are active, so they will have those personal clothing issues. If they don't, I supply, and even if you do, I supply an extensive gear list. It's on my website, and it details all of the extras that you need. And you'll be able to cross-check with that. There are a couple of really good stores in town that have that stuff as well, and I can also supply it through my suppliers and have it ready for you when you arrive. So there's all of those options. The mountaineering boots, I can't stock enough boots for everybody that comes on my trip, and all the sizes and all the rest of it, the whole range. So there are rental options in New Zealand, which I can tell you more about. Sleeping bag is also seen as something personal, so showing up with the right sleeping bag. And the climbing pack, we'll have a look at one of the options for the climbing pack in a moment, but it's usually something that people have themselves. Your international flights, you need to get there however you get there. Most people have another plan to do an extended trip in New Zealand or around the world or whatever it is, so I don't include that, and it keeps the cost down as well. And accommodation before or after the scheduled trip. So what does all this cost? Well, the Spirit of the Mountains trip is a 9-day trip. We're going to run it from the 1st to the 9th of February next year, for all the reasons I mentioned. The Mastery of Self course, personalised tuition, is a value of $6,000. The guided mountaineering instruction and facilitation, also $6,000 for the 9 days. The accommodation, national park concession, the food, all technical mountaineering equipment, $2,150. Ground transport and logistics, $750. Helicopter flights return, $1,400. So, they're not cheap, but they certainly get us straight into the action from the get-go. That's a grand total of $16,300. Now, we haven't run this trip before. We're super enthusiastic to make sure it runs, and we've come up with what we believe is a fair price for this whole operation, and that figure is $10,989. Now, the option on that is to pay a $1,000 deposit today, and then the balance is due on the 1st of December, which is 60 days before departure. Okay, so $10,989. We've gone a step further as well to make it extra interesting for you to sign up straight away. So this is something, it gives you a chance to pay a deposit and get your funds organised in the background. But if you are ready to roll, we have a sweet deal super promo. If you pay in full today, we drop that price to $9,887, and you'll receive a free low alpine 45 to 55 litre mountain attack pack, and this is what that looks like. So a pretty snazzy pack. Its value is $299, and it's exactly what you need for this kind of trip. 55 litres at capacity. Not too big that you've got this towering thing that's full of stuff. Small enough that it compacts down for your day trips out on the glacier. So I've found that 55 litres is the ideal size. And it's also available in red, just in case you're wondering about colour coordinated. Just a show of hands, is anybody interested in this trip? Oh, okay. 100%? Lovely. Well, come and see us afterwards, but we'll give you a chance to ask some questions. That's it from the presentation side of it from me. Stef may have something else to add right now because I've been talking for the last half an hour.
Give your voice the rest
But
of it.
we'll put it out to the floor and you can ask any questions. Hopefully we've answered most of them, but by all means ask questions when you're ready. Stef?
Yeah, I suppose something I'd like to make a point of with regards to the unique point of difference and why we're so excited is, of course, because I get to work with Gavin and he's an exceptional human being, but also the exceptional human beings that we bring into this adventure. But something that's really important, and it may be obvious, it may not be, but it needs to be addressed, and we've touched on it, is the elements. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're both not God, or the equivalent of where we can control the weather, and there will be times that we cannot go out onto the mountain and we need to stay in the hut because otherwise it's just too dangerous. And that's a reality that you face on any mountaineering adventure. In fact, when I went with Gavin, we cut our trip short by half a day to a day, and what we did was we did skill work inside the hut, which is great. So you're always learning, you're always growing. But one of the unique point of differences with this program is that it's actually welcome that we're off the mountain for a little bit, because we can engage deeper into the personal development and the growth work inside the hut. And that's a very, very powerful, unique point of difference than just a standard mountaineering expedition. That, accompanied by the fact that Gavin in and of himself, one of the reasons, and he spoke to this earlier, touched on it, and I hope he doesn't mind me speaking for him, is the reason why he moved away from the mainstream and the norm is because his approach to mountaineering is not just taking people up into the mountain and showing them the mountain. It's about connection, it's about growth, it's about expansion. And for him as an individual, and for me as an individual, that's why we're doing this. So I want to go back to that why, because it's that why that drives us, that why that allows us to really immerse ourselves in this and offer this. And it's a really exciting opportunity. So it's something that I've been wanting to do for a number of years, and Gavin as well. And it's just, it's an opportunity, it's something really different. And yeah, look, for every idea that we have, there's someone else in the world that has the same idea or that has perhaps even implemented it. I'm not saying that Gavin and I are the only ones that are combining a personal development course or a growth framework into a mountaineering adventure and experience. By all means, we're probably not. What we're doing though is we're bringing our own set of life experiences together, which is very unique, in a platform of here's a growth experience from going deep into self, and here is a physical experience of getting into the mountains, which are both effectively growth experiences, and combining them together for something quite different. So we're really quite excited, I am, to see how this actually turns out. This is the first one, but I have no doubt, I have complete faith in myself as a practitioner, as a coach, transformational mindset coach in what I do, and complete faith and trust in this man here, because I wouldn't be putting my name or my brand on the line if I didn't. So when I say I'm interested to see how it turns out, I'm interested to see if it turns out great or really great.